Violently and instantaneously decompressed, professional divers from the Byford Dolphin incident were brutally shredded in a matter of milliseconds, resulting in the most horrific and gruesome diving tragedy in human history. What started off as a routine saturation dive, completed dozens if not hundreds of times by these very same divers, took a catastrophic turn that spiraled into a nightmarish reality. On that fateful day in 1983, 6 experienced saturation divers made their descent underwater to service an offshore oil rig. However, it would be the very last time their bodies were seen in one piece. These are the final moments of the Byford Dolphin disaster. The day was November 5th, 1983. Set in the desolate Norwegian sector of the North Sea, the Byford Dolphin was drilling through treacherous seabeds at Frigg gas field. The 4 divers, Roy Lucas, Edwin Coward, Truls Hellevik, and Bjorn Bergersen, were set to do their routine scheduled maintenance deep beneath the oil rig. 2 dive tenders, William Crammond and Martin Saunders, were tasked with assisting and monitoring the maintenance team with the job. Hellevik and Bergersen led the way and descended to a staggering depth of 295 feet to inspect the bottom frame of the drilling infrastructure. For context, consider this. The maximum depth for recreational scuba diving is capped at 130 feet, highlighting the extraordinary risks with this perilous profession. To safely work in such bone-crushing depths, saturation divers use a diving bell, which is typically connected to a set of chambers where divers temporarily live. Depending on the job, most saturation divers spend between 7 to 28 days at a time in these chambers, eating, sleeping, and working in tight spaces that would make claustrophobics shudder. What made things worse was that this particular drilling company made their saturation divers work 18-hour shifts with barely 3 hours worth of sleep, day after day, for weeks on end. And, as you'll soon learn, the sleep deprivation combined with the intense nature of the job ultimately led to a single lapse in judgment that ended their lives in the most disturbing way imaginable. As the 4 saturation divers stepped into their pressurized chambers, the living quarters were uniquely structured, consisting of Chamber 1 and Chamber 2, alongside an emergency escape capsule mounted above a lifeboat, all connected via a trunk leading to the diving bell. The setup was ingeniously designed, with the bell clamping securely onto this trunk. Operating this intricate system from the outside of the rig were the 2 skilled diving tenders. This efficient configuration maximized time and resources, making the daunting leap from the high-pressure depths to the pressurized chambers smooth and swift. When plunging into such abyssal depths, pressure becomes the diver's relentless adversary, their worst enemy. In fact, ambient pressure increases by approximately 1 atmosphere for every 33 feet of depth in water. With each additional atmosphere, an added force of 14.6 pounds per square meter crushes at the human body. But as harrowing as that sounds, that isn't even the most dangerous aspect of diving to these depths. When plunging into the depths, divers encounter increasing pressure, pushing nitrogen and helium to dissolve into their bloodstream. To offset this, they breathe a specialized gas blend known as a heliox, a mix mainly of helium and oxygen, adjusted to match the diver's depth. The body becomes saturated with these gases in line with the surrounding pressure, which is why it's called saturation diving. However, surfacing too quickly is a recipe for disaster. A rapid ascent turns dissolved nitrogen back into gas, creating hazardous bubbles in the bloodstream, leading to the dreaded bends, marked by nausea, dizziness, and severe joint pain, which can escalate to paralysis or, in some cases, an excruciating death. The only way to prevent this is a slow, deliberate return to the surface, allowing the body to safely diffuse nitrogen and avoid decompression sickness. But there's just one problem. The oil industry, especially with this company, isn't known for having too much patience. Back on the Byford Dolphin, life support technicians meticulously matched the air in the hyperbaric chambers to the precise needs of the divers below, while the dive control team skillfully operated the diving bell, coordinating its descent and ascent with precision. Everything was going according to plan. Until it wasn't. At the early hour of 4 a.m., Truls, Hellevik and Bjorn Bergersen completed their underwater tasks at 295 feet and began their ascent to the surface in the diving bell. Upon surfacing, the next critical step was reattaching the diving bell to the chambers while maintaining the same atmospheric pressure in both components. Meanwhile, Roy Lucas and Edwin Coward awaited their turn, rested and ready for the shift change. In the world of saturation diving, diving tenders play a pivotal role. That is, managing the umbilical, the diver's vital link for air and communication, and ensuring the safe docking of the diving bell to the chambers. On the Byford Dolphin, this responsibility fell heavily on the shoulders of William Crammond and Martin Saunders, who, despite a long 12-hour shift, prepared to secure the bell and its occupants back to safety. This job was a process that these dive tenders were extremely familiar with, having done it all too many times. Typically, transitioning divers from the diving bell to the chambers is a seamless process that can be broken down in 5 simple steps. First, close the diving bell door, previously open for access to the trunk. Second, slowly increase the bell's pressure to ensure a tight seal of the door. Third, shut the door to chamber 1, which is linked to the trunk. Fourth, gradually reduce the trunk's pressure to normal pressure levels of 1 atmosphere. And finally, release the clamp, detaching the diving bell from the chamber living quarters. Steps 1 through 4 went exactly as planned, but unexpectedly, chaos erupted. When Crammond prematurely released the clamp, it set off a catastrophic sequence. In a breathless instant, the environment inside the bell transitioned from the crushing pressure found 297 feet below sea level to the benign 1 atmosphere of the surface. This catastrophic pressure drop catapulted the massive diving bell into the air as if it were a child's toy. Amidst the chaos, the bell became a dangerous projectile, striking the 2 dive tenders, Crammond and Saunders, with devastating force and leaving them critically injured. However, the sequence of events was a bit murky. Whether it was Crammond's premature action or a miscommunication from the diving leader still remains unclear. Tragically, Crammond didn't survive his injuries. Saunders, though alive, was discovered in dire straits, pinned partially under the colossal weight of the 4-ton bell. His lungs collapsed, back fractured in 3 places, and neck broken. But this doesn't even compare to the gruesome deaths that happened within the chamber, where the 4 maintenance divers met their quick and painless end. The rapid and explosive decompression meant that the gases in the divers' tissues expanded so violently and too quickly to be expelled naturally through the lungs. The most disturbing effects were on the soft tissues and fluids, including the blood and internal organs, where bubbles formed instantly. It's as if their blood was boiling from rapid nitrogen expansion. For Lucas, Coward and Bergersen, this would cause massive internal damage, including rapid tearing and rupturing of tissues and vessels, leading to instantaneous death and a body that's beyond recognition. However, the deaths of these 3 divers would look merciful when compared to Hellevik's death. Because Hellevik was closest to the chamber's door at the time, the rapid decompression was so severe that he was sucked through a tiny opening created by the detachment of the diving bell and a jammed door. The fierce pressure slammed him against a small 24-inch hole, exerting a monstrous force equivalent to 25 tons. This unbearable pressure gruesomely forced his internal organs through the tiny opening, leaving a scene reminiscent of a harrowing surgical extraction gone wrong. Investigators piecing together the aftermath encountered an horrendous sight. Hellevik's spinal column, fragments of his windpipe, and portions of his intestines were chillingly left behind in the bell. In stark contrast, his other organs appeared eerily pristine, as though meticulously removed by a skillful surgeon before being expelled with violent force. Fortunately for the maintenance team, this all happened in roughly 0.12 seconds, meaning they all likely experienced no pain despite how horrific it was. In the end, this horrific incident is a stark reminder of the unforgiving nature of the deep sea and the razor-thin margin for error in the world of saturation diving.